I am going to tell you something, and I need you to understand that I am a reasonable person. I pay my taxes. I hold doors open for strangers. I have never once started a fight, lost a job over something stupid, or made an international incident. I was, by every measurable standard, the most forgettable man in the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Then I opened my mouth at a buffet line on a space station, and everything changed. The Galactic Conclave's centennial reception was already the worst night of my career before any of this happened. 600 aliens packed into a room designed for 300, and Earth had exactly 4 representatives in attendance, including me. My name is Calvin Hurst, and my official title was Junior Diplomatic Aide, which is a polished way of saying I carried papers, refilled water glasses, and stood very quietly near walls so that important people could ignore me efficiently. Our ambassador, a sharp woman named Diana Lowell, had spent weeks preparing for this event. She had rehearsed greetings in 11 alien languages. She had memorized seating arrangements, gift protocols, and every possible topic considered offensive to 17 distinct species. She had not prepared me for anything, because my job was to stand near the wall and not breathe too loudly. The problem started when Diana got pulled into an emergency conversation with the Keth Sura delegation on the far side of the room, leaving me alone near a table stacked with food items that were definitely not designed for human digestion. I stood there holding a glass of something purple and fizzy, trying to look purposeful, which is extremely difficult when you have no purpose. That was when Velkara appeared beside me. I had seen her from across the room earlier. Everyone had. The Vethinari are impossible to miss, not because they are particularly large, but because every other species in the room instinctively creates space around them the way water parts around a stone. She stood close to 2 meters tall, with 4 eyes arranged in a slight arc across a face that was smooth and pale as polished bone. Her clothing moved like it was alive, dark fabric rippling with soft patterns of light. She was the senior bond speaker for the oldest civilization currently holding a seat in the conclave, and she had spent roughly 190 years negotiating treaties that shaped the political reality of 4 star systems. She was also, apparently, standing next to me now. I did what any sensible person would do. I panicked quietly and tried to think of something to say. "Long night," I said. She looked at me. All 4 of her eyes moved in a slow, synchronized blink. "You are from Earth," she said. Her voice was low and even, like a tuning fork held close to your ear. "Guilty," I said, which is not a diplomatic response, and Diana would have been furious if she heard it. Calvin Hurst, junior aide. Basically furniture. Velkara considered this. Furniture does not typically speak. "You'd be surprised," I said. "Some of us are very talkative furniture." She did not smile. The Vethinari, I would later learn, do not smile the way humans do. But something shifted in the arrangement of her features, something subtle that I would spend the next several months learning to read. At that moment I had no idea what it meant. I kept talking because silence made me anxious. "You know," I said, "someone told me the Vethinari almost never come to these things. Too many species in one room. Too much noise. But here you are." "I am a bond speaker," she said. "Observation is my function." "What are you observing?" She looked out across the room. "That most species perform comfort when they feel none. That political proximity to power is visible in how beings position their bodies. That Earth's delegation is smaller than its reputation suggests." I laughed before I could stop myself. "Yeah, that tracks. 4 of us for the whole planet. We're doing our best." "Your best appears to involve standing alone near food that could damage your internal organs," she said. "Story of my life," I said. Then, because my mouth has always worked faster than my brain, I added, "We humans bond fast though. Put us in a room with literally anyone and we'll find something to connect over. I'd probably propose to you before the end of the night if things got desperate enough." The words landed in the air between us. I meant it as a joke. I want to be absolutely clear about that. It was the kind of thing you say when you're nervous and you're trying to sound charming, and instead you just sound like a person who is slowly falling off a cliff and narrating the experience. Velkara went very still, not the stillness of offense or confusion. The stillness of something settling, like a key turning in a lock that has been waiting a long time to be opened. All 4 of her eyes moved to my face and stayed there. "I accept," she said. The air left my lungs. "Sorry?" I said. "The bond offer," she said. "I accept it." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Around us, a radius of silence was spreading outward from our position, table by table, cluster by cluster, like a wave moving through still water. I did not yet understand why. I would understand very soon. "That was," I said carefully, "a joke." Among the Vethinari, she said, with the patience of someone who has lived for nearly 2 centuries, a bond offer made in sincerity, without coercion, cannot be rescinded. It is the founding principle of our social architecture. I was being sarcastic. You were nervous, she said, but you were not dishonest. There is a difference. I looked around the room. Every face, tentacle, compound eye, and sensory appendage that could be pointed in my direction was now pointed in my direction. Ambassador Diana Lowell had materialized approximately 4 meters away, and her expression was the color of someone watching a meteor fall toward a very important building. She crossed the room in what I can only describe as a controlled sprint. "Calvin," she said, her voice at a frequency designed to sound calm while communicating absolute emergency. "What did you say?" "I made a joke," I said. "He made a bond offer," Velcara said. Diana looked at Velcara, then at me, then back at Velcara. Then she did something I had never seen Ambassador Diana Lowell do in 4 years of working for her. She closed her eyes for 3 full seconds. "Everyone, please give us a moment," she said. Diana pulled me to the edge of the room with a grip that suggested she had considered a career in construction. She spoke very quietly and very quickly. "The Vethinari," she explained, were the original architects of the Conclave's charter. Their legal and social traditions had been woven into galactic law at a foundational level. A bond offer, under their code, was the single most significant social contract a Vethinari could enter into. They bonded once, one time, in their entire life, and the bond could only be initiated by the other party, never solicited. Rejecting a completed bond acceptance was not merely an insult, it was, under conclave law, grounds for formal diplomatic sanction. 3 species had been suspended from the conclave in the last 4 centuries for lesser violations of Vethinari social protocol. "So what you're telling me," I said, "is that my terrible joke has created an actual galactic incident." "Calvin," Diana said, "if you walk away from this without handling it correctly, Earth may lose its provisional seat in the conclave before we have held it for 6 months." I stood with that for a moment. Somewhere behind us, Velcara was waiting with the perfect composure of a being who had been alive for 190 years and was apparently in no particular hurry. I went back to her. "Walk me through this," I said. "You, me, bond. What does that actually mean?" She tilted her head, very slightly. "It means that I have accepted a life partnership with a human I met approximately 11 minutes ago. And you're okay with that?" "I chose it," she said. "Why?" I said. "There are 600 beings in this room. You could have had a conversation with any of them." She was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of someone searching for an answer, the quiet of someone deciding whether to give you the real one. "I have attended 47 conclave functions in my career," she said. "In that time, no being has spoken to me without calculation. Every word is weighted, every gesture is measured. Every species in this room wants something from the Vethinari and positions themselves accordingly. I wanted someone to talk to because I was nervous," I said. "Yes," she said. "You looked at me without fear. You spoke to me without a strategy. Do you understand how rare that is, Calvin Hurst?" I did not have a good answer to that. "Also," she added, with something that I was beginning to suspect was a very dry sense of humor, "you described yourself as furniture. No diplomat has ever done that." I laughed again. I couldn't help it. Here is what I did not say to her in that moment, because I was still panicking too much to think clearly. I did not say that she had also looked at me differently than anyone else in that room. Not with pity, not with condescension, not with the mild, tolerant boredom that most senior diplomats directed at junior aides. She had looked at me like I was worth paying attention to, and nobody had looked at me like that in a very long time. Instead, I said, "Give me an hour." I called Earth. It took 40 minutes to get the right people on a secure line. I sat in a small side room with Diana, a communications officer named Pete, and a wall screen showing the tense faces of 3 people from the Office of Interstellar Affairs who had clearly been woken up. I explained the situation. They responded with the kind of silence that institutions produce when an institution is experiencing a completely unprecedented problem and has no procedure for it. "You proposed to a Vethinari diplomat," one of the men said flatly. I made a joke, I said. She accepted it. "Under conclave law, the distinction doesn't matter," Diana said. "The offer was made. The acceptance was witnessed by at least 40 delegates. It is on record." Another silence. "What are our options?" someone asked. Diana laid them out. Option 1. Formally withdraw the offer and accept the diplomatic consequences, which were potentially severe and could cost Earth years of progress in the conclave. Option 2. Accept the bond and navigate the situation. There was, technically, an option 3. which involved challenging the validity of the offer on grounds of cultural misunderstanding. But Diana said the odds of that succeeding were below 10%, and the Keth Sura had already sent a formal inquiry to Earth's delegation desk, which meant the story was moving fast. "What does Calvin want to do?" Pete asked. Everyone looked at me. I thought about Velcara standing alone in a crowded room while 600 political creatures moved around her like water. I thought about the way she said, "You looked at me without fear." I thought about a being who had spent 190 years being very careful, waiting for something that did not feel like calculation. I thought about the fact that I was 34 years old, had not had a successful relationship in 6 years, and had just been described by an ancient alien diplomat as unexpectedly brave. "I'm going back in," I said. Diana stared at me. "Tell them it stands," I said. "Tell them I meant it." I walked back into that reception hall with my heart hitting my ribs like a fist on a door. 600 alien faces tracked my movement across the room. I walked up to Velcara, who was standing exactly where I had left her, and I stood in front of her and said, loudly enough for the room, "For the record, I meant what I said." The room stayed quiet for about 3 seconds. Then it erupted. Not in chaos, in movement. Delegates converged toward their respective clusters, words flowing fast. Screens lit up. Communication devices activated across the hall. Greth, Velcara's honor guard, a tall and stone-faced Vethanari who had been standing 20 meters away, walked calmly across the floor and took up a position slightly behind my left shoulder. I did not know what that meant at the time. It meant he was now also responsible for keeping me alive. "You returned," Velcara said. "Did you think I wouldn't? I calculated a 62% chance that your government would instruct you to withdraw." "They left it up to me," I said. She studied me with all 4 eyes. "That is unusual." "We're an unusual planet," I said. Over the next 3 days, I learned things about the Vethanari bond that nobody had seen fit to explain to me beforehand. I learned that Greth following me was not optional. I learned that 3 separate species had sent formal congratulations to Earth's delegation desk, because being bonded to a Vethanari bond speaker apparently conferred a specific class of diplomatic standing that nobody in Earth's Office of Interstellar Affairs had even known existed. I learned that the Keth Sura had sent me a ceremonial weapon, which was the highest form of respect in their culture and which I had absolutely no idea how to hold until Greth spent 40 uncomfortable minutes teaching me. I also learned, slowly, over shared meals and long conversations in observation lounges where starlight moved past the windows in slow rivers of light, that Velcara was funny. Not in the way humans are funny. In the way that a being is funny when they have observed every social performance of every sentient species for nearly 2 centuries, and simply cannot take any of it entirely seriously anymore. She watched me drop a Keth Sura ceremonial object into a delegation fountain and said, without any change in expression, "You are remarkably consistent." I said, "Is that a good thing?" She said, "For a bond speaker who has spent 90 years negotiating with beings who are never consistent, yes. It is disorienting in the best possible way." On the 4th night, she told me something that changed the shape of the whole story for me. She said that the Vethanari had a concept they called the weight of a still life, which described the particular kind of stillness that builds up in a being who has learned to be so careful, for so long, that they stop growing in new directions. She said she had been that kind of still for a very long time. She said that she had walked into the centennial reception expecting nothing, and had found herself standing next to a human who called himself Furniture, and made jokes out of nervousness, and had no strategy at all, and she had felt something shift. I said, "For what it's worth, I wasn't trying to be charming. I was genuinely just panicking." "I know," she said. "That is what made it work." 3 weeks later, a report filed by the Conclave's official historian was quietly circulated among the member delegations. Diana flagged it for me. The report noted, in the dry tone of galactic academic writing, that the Vethanari, across their recorded history, had always approached the bond offer ritual with extreme deliberation. Other species engaged in elaborate courtship processes. Some spent years in formal consideration. The Vethanari bonded once, with absolute certainty, after careful observation. Humans, the report noted, appeared to bond accidentally, in buffet lines, while nervous, with beings they had known for 11 minutes, and then simply refused to take it back. The Keth Sura circulated their own commentary suggesting this behavior was admirable. 2 other species formally requested clarification on whether this was standard human mating protocol. Diana spent an entire afternoon writing diplomatic replies explaining that it was not, in fact, standard. I read the report to Velcara in the observation lounge on the last night before her delegation was scheduled to return to Vethanari space. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "The historian is not incorrect. Do you want me to tell him that you said so?" "I think," she said, "that the record is sufficiently clear." I looked out at the stars. There were more of them than I could count, and somewhere among them was a planet I had grown up on, full of people who had no idea that a junior diplomatic aide with a nervous mouth and no strategy had just accidentally threaded humanity into the oldest power structure in the galaxy by refusing to take a joke back. I thought about what she had said about careful things not growing. I thought about the look on Diana's face when she realized I was going back in. I thought about Greth standing silently at my shoulder for 4 days like a very serious and well-armed shadow. I said, "I should probably learn more about the Vethinari, if this is a real thing." "It is a real thing," she said. "Then I need to understand what I agreed to, properly, not just diplomatically." She turned to look at me, all 4 eyes, steady and calm. "That will take time," she said. "I've got time," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Humans are strange, Calvin Hurst." "Yeah," I said, "but we grow on you." And she did not deny it. I stayed in the Corps for another 9 years after that night. I was eventually given an actual title and an actual office, mostly because the alternative was explaining to the Conclave why Earth's unofficial Vethinari liaison was still classified as furniture. Diana retired early and claimed repeatedly that working with me had advanced her gray hair by at least a decade. Pete, the communications officer, still tells the story at every departmental party, and the version he tells gets slightly more dramatic each year. Greth became something close to a friend, which is a complicated thing to say about a Vethinari honor guard who communicates primarily through varying degrees of silence. But there is one kind of silence that means disapproval, and another kind that means respect. And after the fountain incident, I became familiar enough with the difference to navigate both. The report from the Conclave historian was eventually included in the official record of Earth's provisional membership documentation. Diana told me it was the only membership file in Conclave history that included the phrase, "accidental bond offer in a buffet line," as a contributing diplomatic factor. My daughter, who has 4 eyes and her mother's patience and my complete inability to stay quiet when I'm nervous, found the historian's report when she was 12 and read it cover to cover in one afternoon. She came to me afterward and said, "Was it actually a joke?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Some things," I said, "stop being jokes the second they start being true." She rolled all 4 of her eyes at me, which is something only she can do, and which is, without question, the single most devastating expression I have ever been on the receiving end of. Her mother taught her that. I am almost entirely certain her mother taught her that on purpose. The galaxy is a very large place, full of beings who have spent centuries learning to be careful and deliberate and measured and strategic, full of civilizations that plan for centuries and negotiate for decades, and approach every situation with the full weight of accumulated wisdom and political calculation. And then there is Earth, small and loud and impulsive, bonding with things before we have finished introducing ourselves, making promises in buffet lines and then refusing to back away from them because something in us, something old and stubborn and entirely unreasonable, decides that it might as well be true. We are not the oldest, we are not the strongest, we are not the most careful. But we grow on you. We always grow on you.